U.S. President Donald Trump is facing an urgent legal challenge in New York on charges related to hush money payments during his 2016 campaign. Former President Trump is set to be arraigned on Tuesday, but this is just one end of Trump's legal troubles. Investigations from Atlanta to Washington are haunting the former president. The vulnerability Trump faces in Washington alone has become clear over the past month. Judges, in a succession of sealed rulings, have turned aside the Trump team's efforts to block grand jury testimony, including from his own lawyer and vice president. Here, the case relates to criminal mishandling of classified documents at Trump's Florida home in Mar-a-Lago and the possible obstruction of that probe. According to a Washington Post exclusive report, the Justice Department and FBI investigators have amassed fresh evidence pointing to possible obstruction in the Mar-a-Lago probe. The report says additional evidence came as investigators used emails and text messages from a former Trump aide to help understand key moments last year. The new details highlight the degree to which the focus of the probe has shifted on the obstruction elements of this case. The Mar-a-Lago investigation is one of 4 separate criminal probes involving the former president. In the case related to hush money paid to adult film actress Stormy Daniels, Trump is set to make his first court appearance in that case on Tuesday here in New York. He's also being investigated by the Justice Department and a state prosecutor in Georgia over efforts to block Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election. On Tuesday night, Trump will hold an event at his Mar-a-Lago club after returning from Manhattan. He's expected to be joined in Florida by his supporters as he tries to project an image of strength and defiance and turn the charges into a political asset to boost his 2024 presidential campaign. Well, for more on this, we are joined by Patrick Adalik. He is joining us live from Newcastle. Professor Adalik is an assistant professor of American history at Northumbria University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on WION. We'd like to make a sense of this situation and Trump's legal challenges from a legal perspective. Some believe that the judge may go as far as putting a gag order on the former president and preventing him from discussing this case that's being played out in the Manhattan court for now. And that will probably be very difficult because the president wants to talk about this case and there'll be First Amendment issues that will follow. Can you talk about that for us and a possible gag order and what that entails?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. And yes, I think it seems possible, or if not plausible, that some kind of gag order will be imposed, not least because, as Donald Trump has repeatedly demonstrated, he is very kind of keen to not just talk about the case, but to push back fairly aggressively in public. If you look at some of his statements about the case on Truth Social, the conservative social media site he uses as his primary platform, he's called the Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg a psychopath. He's called him a racist. He's been similarly kind of disobliging about the judge presiding over this case. So I think, that it seems very possible there will be some kind of gag order and or some kind of direction there. But it raises the question of whether Donald Trump will actually respect it or continue to ignore it. And if he does ignore it, or if he does kind of if he starts attacking the judge during a criminal investigation, that just piles further charges onto him. Then he's facing contempt citations, for instance.
And there are many who believe that of all the charges being brought against the former president, this one in New York was the most flimsy of all, considering the fact that it had statute of limitation issues. There were multiple other federal investigators and prosecutors who threw it out, and, a slew of problems. And now it's sort of being Frankenstein by Alvin Bragg. Do you think that this case, being sort of the first one presented against Donald Trump, and if it gets ultimately thrown out, I mean, it depends on what happens. We still don't know what the charges are. It'll affect his other cases that may be a lot more serious.
I'm sorry, I think I lost you a little there, but I hope I got the gist of what you were saying. Yes, as you said in your introduction, this is one of a number of kind of criminal and civil investigations that are swirling around Donald Trump. I suppose we have to start calling him the embattled or the beleaguered former president. But only his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, thinks that the federal investigation into his alleged mishandling of classified documents and obstruction of justice that you mentioned in the introduction, that is the most serious case that he's currently facing. But this one being the first does mean that it has that kind of incredible precedent of being the very first time that criminal charges have been brought against a former U.S. president or current U.S. president. We've seen a number of times throughout U.S. history when it seemed that certain presidents, whether it's Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, might possibly face some kind of criminal charge. But the fact that this has happened now is a genuinely momentous precedent.
Yeah, it sure is. Professor Patrick Andelick, thank you so much for joining us on WION and making sense of all of this from a legal perspective. We look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you very much for having me.